All right, listen, thanks for coming along here today, and again, apologies for the delay. I'll just make some statements about the Productivity Commission's report into the future of the retail industry. The Australian retail industry is worth $53 billion. It employs 1.2 million people. It is very important to Australia's economic future and indeed the jobs that it employs. That is why the government stood by the retail sector in 2008 and 2009 during the global financial crisis. And this year we've seen a lot of pressures on the Australian retail industry. We've seen the stubbornly high valuation of the Australian dollar above that of the price of the American dollar. We see unfolding and concerning volatility in Europe, and we see a growth in interest in online shopping. Something like 6% of all retail is now transacted online, although only 2% is done internationally at this point. And we have also seen in the course of this year a debate with some of the large retailers demanding that a GST be put on items below $1,000 which are purchased online from overseas. The retail industry and the future of the retail is a complex matter which is a national challenge, not just an issue for government. We have in the Productivity Commission report some suggestions and directions for a way forward. We believe fundamentally that innovation and adaptability and being consumer focused will be what makes the retail industry successful in the future. And the retail sector needs to promote and look after its own future. There's been a wide landscape of issues reported on, but I do think that some of the recommendations of the report need to be addressed specifically today. That is why I'm pleased to announce that we'll be establishing for the first time in 112 years the formation of the Retail Council of Australia. We believe that something as important as the retail industry needs all the players around the same table, even if they disagree with each other, but talking together, united by a common interest in the retail industry. We look forward to the participation from industry associations, employer groups, unions, thinkers about the future of the retail sector, and all those who have an interest in a successful and internationally competitive retail sector. We will be taking, as a result of these recommendations, the creation of a task force to look at whether or not it is possible to implement a low-value threshold on the GST. The report of the Productivity Commission at this stage makes it very clear that if we were to have a threshold on items at $100, in other words, items above $100 purchased online would attract the GST where they currently only attract the GST at $1,000, that it would cost $1.2 billion to collect $500 million worth of tax. At this stage, it doesn't make economic sense for the taxpayers to spend more money collecting a tax than would actually be raised. Having said that, the Productivity Commission has recommended the creation of a task force to examine, as the tax leakage increases, whether or not it is possible to lower the cost of collecting the tax. The best efforts of this interim task force, no earlier than 3 months and no later than 6 months, to advise the government, is it possible that as the amount of online business increases, whether or not the cost of collecting GST from overseas businesses could work. In addition to the creation of this task force and the establishment of a Retail Council of Australia, matters to do with the deregulation of the labour market and retail, we are referring to the review of Fair Work Australia and the review of the awards to be held next year. But again, as a basic position, the Gillard government believes that cutting the conditions of shop assistance is not the way for the retail industry to promote its future. The retail industry is already, in many areas, a lower payer than average wages, and we don't believe that the low road of industrial relations is going to be the way which the retail industry can survive. There are other recommendations. Some of these fall squarely in the province of state and local governments. The Productivity Commission has recommended that trading hours be deregulated in South Australia and in Western Australia. This is a matter for those governments. We are going to take up through the Retail Council and COAG, however, matters to do with retail zoning. The Productivity Commission did make very clear they did have concerns that it was very difficult for some large competitors to enter existing retail markets in the suburbs of Australia and the towns of Australia because of difficult or complex red tape zoning laws which prevent the introduction of more competition into the retail market within Australia. In addition, the government is going to consider issues around copyright and the issues to do with businesses not being able to import from third-party jurisdictions branded products which there's already someone holding a licence for in Australia. So there are a range of issues to do with the future of retail, from retail tenancy to zoning to copyright, right through to the industry working together and coming together. The government is, at this stage in conclusion, stating very clearly that the best information we have available is that to put a GST on items lower than $1,000 would cost more than it would raise, so that doesn't make sense. But to balance against that, we are taking on board the recommendation of the Productivity Commission to set up a low-value threshold task force to see if it is possible to lower the cost of collecting and import duties as goods come in from overseas. I thank the Productivity Commission for their work.
So if you can find a way to collect that tax cost effectively, would you commit to imposing a GST on low-value parcels?
No, at this stage, let's be clear. Let's be very clear. All the experts so far, other than some of the large retailers, have indicated to us that they cannot see a way at the moment of collecting a GST on items underneath $1,000 without paying more to collect it than the money that's actually raised. But to be fair, there is a theory of tax which says there should be competitive neutrality, which means that foreign importers should pay their fair share if it's possible to collect that taxation. But at this stage, we are not proposing, and the Productivity Commission doesn't recommend, to lower the threshold on items bought online from overseas. Through negotiation with the retail groups, we've asked a group of 3 experts, led by Bruce Cohen, to report to us ideally as early as in 3 months' time, but it may take up to 6 months. And we want to see the work of that task force can say if it's possible to improve our tax collection systems for our freight forwarders and at Australia Post. This is an important issue more generally. As we become more engaged on the internet with the rest of the world, it is timely to see if our collection systems are up to speed. So we'll be working with Australia Post and Customs and the freight forwarders, and we'll be looking at jurisdictions who've managed to deal with some of these technology issues to make sure that we're not missing anything.
It is something that they have managed to do in most countries overseas. What is it about Australia that makes us different?
Well, I don't share the view that most countries do it overseas, but to be fair, we've developed our system. The Howard government, when they introduced the GST, we only introduced a GST in 1996. Sorry, it was after 1996. And that threshold was at $250. Then our GST, which was a relatively late arrival compared to some other jurisdictions, the threshold was increased to $1,000 by the then Liberal government in the early 2000s. What's also happened is that some of our larger retailers have tried their hand at the internet in the early 2000s and got their fingers burned, and I think some of them haven't seen the rise of the internet. Let's be clear. If consumers are shopping online, and this is an important point in the Productivity Commission report, a lot of the evidence shows that some of the reasons why they go online is because a far lower price than the 10% of the GST, of a far better range, and they're looking for issues of service. But the greatest development in the online has actually been domestically, where Australians are shopping online. We think there are opportunities online. The Australian retail industry should not regard the internet as some sort of big brown snake which has snuck into the kitchen and is a peril to the future of retail. If Australians are seeking bargains online, Australians will continue to seek bargains online. The whole point about this Productivity Commission report and why the government commissioned it is the future of retail needs to be much more analysed and debated than having a debate about where you set the threshold. But to be fair to the proponents about the debate about the threshold, this government's not shirking the hard work of examining if it can be done cheaper. But I do also, and we must also be very clear, that consumers are shopping online for a whole host of reasons, from being value conscious to taking benefit to the high dollar, to looking for range, to looking to frustration with some bricks and mortar. But in all of this, I should acknowledge that the government is most mindful of the concerns of small business, where they see people coming in and trying on items and buying them online. That's a difficult challenge. We're respectful of the problems that small business have in the area of retail tenancies. We're interested to keep considering the work around the propositions of copyright, where small businesses are at a disadvantage. So we think that there are collective solutions for the future of retail, and there's no one silver bullet which is going to solve it. Certainly not by just arbitrarily, without research and debate, just imposing or lowering a threshold, putting a tax on some online items purchased.
So the government was going to take the low road on industrial relations. What did you mean by that?
Oh no, we're not going to take the low road.
What did you mean by that?
Oh, well, there are some who think that the future of always be wary of prophets who say there's a single solution to a complex problem. Always be wary of those who would say that if we could just scrap penalty rates at Christmas time, that then the retail industry would have a bright future. The reality is that retail wages are not high. The reality is that the Australian retail industry does need a skilled staff and does need to attract people to have a future in retail. Having an old-fashioned debate about cutting someone's wage rate working on a Sunday from X dollars to X minus $10, surely we are smarter in this country than just cutting people's wages.
That's got some implications too, isn't it? They talk about flexibility rather than just the penalty rates.
We all love flexibility, but none of us like to. But this government doesn't like to see low-paid people having their wages cut.
Guys, we've got Marty Osmond, Peter Strong and Russell Zimmerman here as well, if you want to have a quick
Question
second.
on an unrelated.
All right, we'll just do that one then and then. Yeah, sure.
Green Bedcraft said some rather critical things about the efficiency dividend and what it might mean for ASIC and its enforcement. Basically said it'll put investors at risk. Got a response to that?
I haven't seen his comments, but I do know with the efficiency dividend that this government's committed to getting back into the black. When you have a look at the rest of the world, Australia's economic numbers are pretty reasonable. That doesn't mean that small business or consumers are doing it easily in Australia. But one of the reasons why our unemployment numbers are half that of the Eurozone, why our Commonwealth public sector debt is the envy of the OECD, is because we are returning to the black in the fastest pace that we've ever seen in Australian history. Part of that is through the efficiency dividend. We will work these issues through with the relevant regulators. I've got no doubt that we'll work these matters out. But